introduce briefly each of the different panelists, and we will hear from them, and we will have some time at the end for audience questions. So please feel free to enter in the chat your questions, and we will have some time at the end. So we're going to start out with Ubongo. Ubongo is Africa's leading producer of kids edutainment, television programs, educational apps, and other content. As a nonprofit social entrepreneur organization, they create fun, localized, and multi-platform educational content that helps kids learn and leverage their learning to change their lives. We welcome Doreen Batayunga, the pre-production coordinator, to speak with us about Ubongo's work. Thank you, Doreen, for joining us, and we hand off to you.
Thank you, Emily, for that introduction, and hello, everyone. For the purpose of my internet connection, because it has been a bit glitchy, I am going to turn off my video. I'll try to turn it back on, hopefully during the Q&A session. But for now, please put this face to the voice that you'll be hearing, and apologies for that in advance. Great. So as I said, my name is Doreen Batingo, or as introduced, and I am the pre-production coordinator at Ubongo. Ubongo is a non-governmental organization that was founded in 2013 in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. That's in East Africa. And the purpose was to help the African child find the fun in learning, especially since most of their learning environment included learning in crowded classrooms and with limited resources. So as you can imagine, that doesn't really breed a liking of learning, right? It becomes something that's tedious and unenjoyable. Next slide, please. So our innovation then became to first be informed by localized educational research, where here we map local public schools curricula to identify the topics that are and are not being taught in schools. Then we use the human-centered design approach, where we sit with children and identify the knowledge gap that exists in those topics. And once that is done, we use the power of entertainment to teach the topics, which for us at Ubongo, it means catchy songs and engaging storylines. And then we reach our audience through mass media and digital platforms. So the goal for us was to leverage the accessible technology that African families already had. So things like radio, television, and mobile phones, so that they can be accessed with mobile phones. They can access our content through YouTube, mobile application, IVR, and so forth. And we were hoping that this will help the kids learn and leverage their learning to change their lives. Next slide, please. Our products at Ubongo include Akili and Me, and this is a show that targets children within the ages of 3 to 6. So this is the pre-primary age. And with this show, we teach English as a second language. We teach social-emotional skills, health and nutrition, numeracy, as well as literacy. And this is a preview of that. So David, please click the link.
Akili, 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 Akili.
Meet Akili, a 4-year-old who lives on the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. Every night, Akili falls asleep and is transported to the magical world of La La Land, where she makes friends, learns to speak English, and develops her numeracy and social-emotional skills. Akili and Me was created in 2015 by Ubongo to help kids in Africa learn through fun and imagination. Akili is the most watched preschool show in Tanzania, and studies show that kids who watch Akili outperform their peers by 24% in numeracy and 12% in overall school readiness after just 1 month of daily viewing. The show has been adapted to other languages, and viewership is rapidly growing across Africa. It is gaining popularity online amongst Africans in diaspora and African Americans looking for positive Black cartoons for their kids. Please support Akili. Share the show and Akili's YouTube channels with all your family and friends. Download Akili's apps, ebooks, and musical albums. Donate and help us fund the creation of more Akili and Me content.
Right, so that's Akili and me. That's just a quick and simple summary of what the show is about. Our other products includes our Tunakujenga or Akili family in English, which is designed to provide parents and caregivers with the necessary information and tools to help support their children's learning and overall development and well-being. And we usually broadcast these as short PSAs or skits. David, please, this is a preview of that.
Growing together. Growing together, growing stronger, Akili family.
The last time you disciplined your child, did they understand why? Have you ever asked them?
My mother gave me 10,000 shillings to give to Mama Zamda for a village community bank, Vikoba. On my way, I met Daudi and started playing football. Then unknowingly lost the money. When I went back home, my mother hit me using a wire. It was painful and I didn't like what she did to me because it was an accident. Next time I lose money, I'll just tell her that it was stolen.
After the punishment, Rashidi has learned that blaming others is the better way to avoid punishment. Instead of the punishment, his mother could have told him that she has lost faith in him and that he's not allowed to play football again until his behavior improves.
Teach, don't hit. Growing together, growing stronger.
So this is an example.
Akili family.
Right, so this is an example of one of the PSAs that were part of a campaign that discourages corporal punishment, but we also have others where we encourage caregivers and parents to play with their kids so that they can learn through that manner. And then another product that we have is our Akili and You toolkits, and these are packages of our Akili topics into biteable sizes, and they are available in accessible formats that can easily be downloaded and printed to support parents, caregivers, and teachers in supporting their children or students' learning. And then finally, Ubongo Kids. This is a show that targets primary school children, so basically kids of ages 7 and 14, according to our system here. And in this show, we teach STEM, so that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but we also make sure that each episode that has one of those topics is coupled with a socio-emotional skill. So things like having empathy, a growth mindset, as well as curiosity. And this is a preview of that.
Ubongo Kids features 5 friends and their animal companions who use math and science as well as life skills to solve various problems and mysteries in the village of Kokotoa. Through educational stories of kids who look and live like them, young learners across Africa are encouraged to grow their brains, ask questions, and find the fun in learning. Created in 2014 by Ubongo, Ubongo Kids is the first locally made cartoon show in Swahili in Tanzania and was an immediate success with both kids and their parents. The show reaches families from all demographics, including those in non-electrified villages through a partnership with USAID. Ubongo Kids has since been adapted to other languages and now airs in over 28 countries across Africa. As the leading media platform for learning in Africa, Ubongo has partnered with a variety of organizations ranging from world-renowned NGOs to small local initiatives to effectively communicate critical messages on everything from malaria, clean energy, and financial literacy to millions of families. It is no secret Ubongo Kids is building brains and changing the lives of kids across Africa.
Ubongo Kids, Ubongo Kids, Ubongo Kids.
Thank you, David. So basically, these are part of our products that we provide to our target audience. And with that, next slide, please. With all this content being broadcasted in numerous platforms, we are proud to say that we have what we call the largest classroom in Africa, with 17 million households learning with us monthly through television and radio. We are growing fast to reach kids across the continent, where we're on the top television channels in 14 countries and broadcasting in 7 local African languages now, with more to definitely come in the future. Next slide, please. And we are also proud that children who engage with our continent have shown an increase in health, knowledge, numeracy skills, as well as cognitive development, as are the percentages that are in this slide. So that is definitely something that encourages us and keeps us going in our mission. Next slide, please. So while we were edutaining our way this year, we were hit with COVID-19, as many across the globe. And almost overnight, we had millions of children that were out of school, but still needed to continue learning. And we, as Ubongo, had to work from home. So we asked ourselves, what can we do to best support our children and their caregivers during this pandemic? Next slide. So these are some of the goals that we mapped out for ourselves. One of our goals was we wanted to support families to keep up with their kids' learning and well-being at home. While we wanted to keep kids learning and developing skills, we knew that we cannot expect to replace school or match the curriculum step by step, or that with them returning to school as if it was not missed in the months that they were going to be at home. And then we also understood that parents cannot be expected to be classroom teachers. So our immediate response was to release content library for free use by all broadcasters and partners, so they can easily be accessed by children. We also had a goal where we wanted to share critical health messages and then provide COVID-19 specific social and emotional support for families across Sub-Saharan Africa during these stressful times. So we specifically ventured into the development of new content to support home learning and well-being, with focus on radio and local language adaptations. And then we also wanted to support partners in both the public and private sector with resources and guidance to utilize mass media and technology to promote health, well-being, and home learning. So with this goal, we worked with partners to integrate our resources into their own response, and we provided them with quick turnaround production of key messages and collaborated in the launch of parent support services through radio, chatbot, SMSs, etc., so that we can support the shift to home-based learning. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, the one before this, before the weekend be. Okay, I think there's a slide missing. My apologies. But basically, what happened was we created family-friendly songs for radio, IVR, and PSS for television and social media. So such PSAs included how to make sure that you're receiving your information from credible sources, how to keep healthy mentally and emotionally, and of course, the importance of social distancing and so forth. And we made sure, or we were committed to producing these PSAs on a weekly basis by repurposing our old content where needed, but then also finding safe and creative ways to produce new ones while we all had to work from home. We also created new family learning and well-being programs for radio and basically basic mobiles. So this included a radio show that provided caregivers with updated information on everything COVID-19 related and how to keep them and their families safe. So it also included different games that encouraged the entire household to participate using everyday home and environment items. These games specifically helped children to learn through play, while at the same time providing them with numeracy, literacy, and to develop cognitive skills. And then we also had a segment that talked about stress, and we talked them through numerous activities that helped them to reduce the stress. So then to this slide of We Can Be. So our biggest lesson learned during this period is that yes, we can play a significant role in children's education journey through distance learning programs. And yes, we can be flexible and adaptable in doing so. So instead of giving up and saying we can't make new content, which was almost like our first block because we couldn't access the studio and we were so accustomed to working in office, we just decided to repurpose old content. And then we were also reminded on the difference between outcomes versus outputs, where we had to readjust how we work and what we produce, but for the same outcome. Also, it became even more apparent to us the importance of using whatever means people already have to reach children with content and research, whether it was radio, SMS, IVR, etc. And with the pandemic sort of bringing us who work in the distance learning fields to the forefront in terms of the demand to keep children learning outside of the classroom, we were made aware that the education landscape is continuously changing, and so does technology. So we need to always think ahead. And so as we proceed, to build the future African astronaut, teacher, policeman, singer, manager, which is what our characters here are representing, it's important to keep in mind, and hopefully to keep this in mind, and that hopefully it will not take another pandemic for us to even revisit these thoughts. And with that, with the last slide, thank you for your time and for listening to what Ubongo does and how COVID-19 reshaped us rather.
Thank you so much, Doreen and Ubongo. We are going to move on to Farm Radio International and let them present, and then we'll take questions at the end. So just a reminder to the audience, please feel free to add questions into the chat, and then we'll have a period of question and answers at the end. So Farm Radio International works collaboratively with community radio stations to create programming that raises awareness, increases knowledge, and drives the adoption of behaviors that help millions of people across Sub-Saharan Africa enjoy better livelihoods, nutrition, and overall well-being each year. We welcome Benjamin Fiafor, the country director of Ghana, to speak about Farm Radio International's work. Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon to you all. Farm Radio International is a communication for development organization started in Canada, but we currently have offices in 12 African countries. And we see ourselves as one of the only NGOs dedicated exclusively for using radio as a tool for rural development in Africa. Why radio? We still believe that the population we are reaching, radio is practical, and everyone, as we speak, will have radio either on his mobile phone or sitting in a car can have access to radio, and also wherever you are, you may have one at home. So we see radio as still very relevant. And again, we've also identified that it is very easy to combine radio with all the new digital technologies. That is what makes radio more and more powerful for us as an organization. What do we do as an organization? We work in three main areas. The first area of our work is in the area of broadcaster resource development. We realize that there are so many radio stations, and the stations are there. They have the radio as the resource, the frequency. But when it comes to content, what's new, they need to share with the farmers or the farming family, they sometimes do not have that information. So Farm Radio had a well-tested approach of putting together radio resources in the form of radio scripts, readily available on different range of topics. And then also, we also have training materials for them. We call that broadcaster how-to, and then research materials we call the backgrounder. This allows presenters to do their work in a better way. And also we support them with sometimes face-to-face training to enable them to deliver on the work they do. Another work that Farm Radio focuses on is the radio innovation. The radio innovation comes in a form of Farm Radio conducting research into new ways to make radio better than before. We believe that radio is a two-way tool. But as we speak now, most of the radio stations are not able to utilize this approach very well. They end up just doing studio-based program without ensuring that the listeners are part of this. So Farm Radio has developed an approach and a tool we call the Uliza that allow listeners to call in before radio program, and then also they can leave their questions, comment. They can also ask answer questions that are already pre-recorded on this system. By so doing, the radio presenter, the production team, and everyone will know what listeners are thinking. This helps to make very relevant and tailor-made for the listeners. We also work in the area of radio projects where we run targeted project that uses radio. And within this COVID period, we had a lot of requests on this type of project, type of radio programming, because most of the organization that had planned face-to-face training realized that a face-to-face training cannot work and had to now resort to the use of radio and the Uliza system as a way of delivering the same training material that they would have done with the face-to-face training. So for example, we are working on a project that is looking at how to increase and safely produce vegetables. And this information is for the farmers. And what we do is we make sure we have a formative research that allow us to know what the farmer knowledge already. We also do this formative research to understand the area, the farmer, their listening habits, and any other relevant information that we need to produce a very good content for the farmers. And we train the radio stations, design the radio program using a multi-stakeholder approach, because we think we need to involve everyone during the course of that design process. And then again, we put in place a quality assurance approach where we listen to the program that is aired by the radio station, and then we are able to give them feedback from a distance. This is what we do as a way of our work. Farm Radio believes that, yes, radio is very important. It works. When we look at the previous work we've done on the various projects, we can say that up to 40% of our farmers, when they listen to the radio program, end up applying the farming techniques that is given to them. One, because of the way the radio program is designed, and then the way we ensure that the farmers themselves participate during the course of the radio programming. So part of the programming allows them to share their questions, share their experience, and also ensure that when they have questions, they leave them on the Uliza application, and this allow subject matter specialists to respond to all the questions that are asked. And when we did our cost benefit analysis, we realized it's around 50 cents per a family that participates in farm radio programming. Who do we partner with? We work mainly with radio station as our key partners. And as a result of this, when during the pandemic, we designed a particular package for them, because the radio stations realized they still need to work. They can't break, even though we are all at home, they still need to go out there, record or share information. So we designed a particular program for the radio partners that allowed them, one, to cross-check information, because there was a lot of fake news around that time. So we put in place an IVR system and a subject matter specialists that are there 24/7 to respond to questions from broadcasters across Africa. We also put in place a support fund to the radio stations to allow them to acquire PPEs to enable them, one, to work outside and within, and also to enable them to have a free space devoid of COVID, so that they are secure as they work within their workplace. And as a result of that, we believe that the capacity of the radio station to continue working within the period was enhanced. We also work with other knowledge partners, and these knowledge partners include agricultural research institutions that help us regularly to ensure that all the necessary information that we pass on are well researched and approved by the government institutions. We also work with the government extension agent to ensure that they are part and parcel of the radio programming, because radio for extension is not replacing the extension officer, but rather coming in to support the work that the extension officers are doing. And most importantly, we engage with farmer organizations and individual farmers to ensure that the information we are providing is directly in line with what the farmers are also expecting. We have worked with a lot of organizations and partners who recognize the need for radio for scale, and the list, I'm sure, is showing on the screen by now with as organizations we have partnered with. We realize that doing radio for us is not just any kind of radio, but a radio must respond to the needs and aspiration of a development partner and the people we are working with. So we have different radio approaches. We have the participatory radio campaign, which allow us to work with listeners in the area of behavioral change and introducing new things that listeners need to learn. For example, introducing farmers within the COVID period to the use of new seed and new ways of applying specific fertilizers that the farmers need to use. And this required the participatory radio campaign. We also have an approach we call the Her Voice on Air. This allows us to ensure that listeners, especially women, are carried along as the radio program is going on, and they share their own story along the program. This increases the participation of women, especially during the course of the program. We also have an approach we call the cooking show. This approach helps us to address area of nutrition, where we want to introduce, for example, the orange flesh sweet potato to farmers, because nutrition, it is very nutritious and it is not well known to farmers. So the radio become a cook show that allow listeners to see how this radio program is done in their community. So there are some aspects of the cook show that is done within the community, recorded and played on air. We also have the radio marketplace as an approach that allow us to deal directly in the area of value chains, which allow the radio programming to look at issues related to markets and then backwards to production. So what is the market looking for? And how can farmers also produce to meet the demands of the market? So we use the radio marketplace to ensure that we design and produce programs that that ensure that backward linkage from market to production. We also use the listening posts, especially to monitor and communicate on key issues or interventions that are currently going on. So the listening post does both monitoring and at the same time airing information that is needed. And the last approach is the climate and weather advisory approach. This approach also helps us to deal with the key issue of environment and also climate change. What are the challenges that we hope to address as an organization when we are doing our radio programming? Within the COVID period and even before the COVID period, our focus is on environment. But within the COVID period, we had the opportunity to start an educational program that is currently ongoing in Sierra Leone and Liberia. This program is going to a family literacy program to encourage reading within the family and then also within the children. We also dwell on gender-related programming because we realize that radio is capable of bringing women when it is done well to ensure that the women participate during the course of the radio program. Our focus also is in the area of health and nutrition, which is very key for the farming family. And as a result of this, we keep producing programs to ensure that they listen and improve upon their health and nutritional choices. What are the technology landscape in the countries that we are currently working in? I would say that radio ownership, for example, is between 60 to 80% ownership, but women do not have a lot of this radio. So sometimes they are put into groups to listen to radio programs. We also know that mobile phone penetration is very high among the youth and then among the adult men. And we also make sure we utilize this during the course of our programming. Television ownership is also very good, and we have a lot of programming on television, but just that the timing for farmers is very difficult, and then also not all of them have the electricity to watch television. But radio, it is far more easier, and now that we've combined with the telephone, it makes it easier for more and more farmers to listen and learn using the radio. How has the technology impacted the group of people we are working with? We believe that the farming family are currently using the various technology. They are using mobile feature phones. They are using smartphones. The youth are using the social media. So what we do is we make sure we combine our radio program with which is far easier for them because they always have data on their mobile phones. Again, we realize that the Department of Agriculture and other also appreciate the system we use that allow them to have access to the radio program anywhere by click of a button, because all the programs are loaded and sometimes put in a form of a podcast, so they can also listen, review, make comments, and this is also helping. And we are integrating gradually the weather apps that allow the radio station to share weather information, market information during the course of the radio program. And in terms of how COVID impacted on our work, I would say that during this period, we had a very slow because of the protocol, that internal protocol of the organization to work from home, but gradually we picked up and we have provided the needed support to various organizations, as I mentioned earlier, especially the radio partners. And also we have had so many more requests for support within this period than ever, because we have developed an approach we call the remote-led radio and ICT-based advisory service for extension delivery. This allows us to design our program remotely using online facilitation method, conduct our research using online CATI survey and other forms of surveys. And we also do the training for the radio station to air their program using an online approach. And this had really worked during the COVID period for the radio stations. And I think what is next for us as an organization, we are working seriously to ensure that our radio programs become more and more sustainable and not project driven. So that is what we are looking at working on to ensure that quality radio is available to every farmer everywhere using the farm radio Greenleaf approach. And I'm sure we have a Greenleaf song that will end my presentation with. We also are working to ensure that we support various governments to develop the strategy for using radio and other ICTs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, for sharing all of the work that Farm Radio International has been doing. We are, for sake of time, going to hand straight to Shujaz, but we will share a link for some of the audio content and some of the work so you can see what Farm Radio International does in audio and video formats. We'll share that link for you in the chat box. So we're on to Shujaz, our last panel. And Shujaz Incorporated is a network of social ventures based in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. Their ventures inspire, entertain, and mobilize 7.5 million 15 to 24-year-olds across East Africa. We welcome Rob Burnett and Farida Nzandani to speak about Shujaz's work. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Rob Burnett. I'm going to talk a little bit about Shujaz, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Farida, who will talk about some of the digital work we've been developing recently. So Farida and I represent a team of young people based in Nairobi and in Dar es Salaam. Not all on this call, sadly, but I thought it was important that you should see some of the faces of the young people who we work with. And we really focus on young people since our target audience is also young people. Our organization has been around for 10 years. We are a network of ventures. We have a number of things that we do, but the underlying principle of all of our work is the same. We firmly believe that young people can transform society. And our task and our mission is to try and remove the barriers that can release young people's own ability and to achieve their potential. We have three main ventures that we sustain and develop and have been running for some time. So the key one is Shujaz, which means heroes in Sheng, which is the slang language that we like to use. I'm going to talk about that. And more recently, as the internet has crept into our audience in a meaningful way, we started the Hustler MBA, also known as Shujaz Biz, which Farida will talk about. And then we have some other work in the digital space that maybe I'll touch on in a minute. As you heard in the introduction, our media reaches about 7.5 million people across East Africa, so 56% of all Kenyans aged 15 to 24. And we know that because we're really deeply rooted in data. So data collection and analysis is a very, very big part of our organization and the way we work. And as you saw in the photograph, we're about 60 mostly young people. I'm an exception to that rule, but mostly young people based in Kenya and Tanzania. Thought it might be interesting to talk about the sort of theory of change. How does media cause change to happen? And I'll talk a bit about what we make, but I think we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how is it that a story or a media experience can actually lead to social change. And over the last that has been trying to unpack that. How does a story cause change to happen? So our own work begins on the left-hand side of the screen here with mass media. So we are, I believe, the world's biggest producer of comic books. I think since 2010, we've distributed 110 million copies of our comic book in Kenya. And we construct those comic books around true stories, around real life stories about real young people growing up and overcoming problems, everyday problems, in Tanzania and in Kenya. We don't work with superheroes. It's not that kind of comic book. It's not that kind of story. It's about real young people. And the stories are broadcast on the radio and on the internet. And at the beginning of our journey, we use mass media to reach millions and millions of people. Now, out of that, we then gain a relationship. Our brand starts to be trusted, and people start to walk with us on a journey with the characters, with the stories that we're telling. And the next place that we see them, if we're lucky, is on social media. So we have about 3.5 million young people who connect with us on one or other social channel. So that allows those people who have access to the internet to get deeper into the stories. And we think that's important because all of our research tells us that really the big thing that we can achieve, that really is the place where change, where social progress starts to happen, is in conversations. Can we help young people to talk about big, important ideas that they might never talk about normally? How can we turn their heads and connect them to information and ideas that are really important and help them understand what's possible? And we think that's extremely important, especially for the target audience that we focus on, these 15 to 24s. So really thinking about the millions of young people who are coming out of school. They have hopes and dreams and ambitions, but when they leave school, they also leave information systems behind them. They don't read the newspaper. They don't watch the news. They aren't interested they're not connecting with formalized information. So how do we connect those young people and their hopes and ambitions with really helpful information? And so we use a story to do that, and we use conversations as the place where we see change starting to happen. And a lot of our research has been to measure that, to say, can we really see how that transformation occurs as people dig into big topics and change the way they understand them? So out of the conversations, one of the consistent things that we observe is what the psychologists call locus of control. So you might also think of that as agency. Young people starting to feel more confident that they can control the outcomes of their lives. And that agency is really the building block of social change, we believe. That sense of young people that I have power to influence tomorrow. Because what we see over and over and over again is as soon as young people start to believe that they have the capacity to improve their own lives, and they get that belief by looking at role models, by reading stories about real peers that they have in the community around them in Kenya and around in East Africa, they start to realize that they have that capacity. And as young people develop that feeling, and it's something that we measure in our research, we start to see them making better and better choices. So the things we focus on and the things that we measure are finance, financial fitness. Are people able to control their income, make more money? Their health. So a big thing for us is contraception and contraceptive prevalence rate. Are we helping young people control their fertility, choose when they have their babies, choose when they get married, rather than being forced into that decision by mistake? And then ultimately agency. Do people feel like they have control, that they can engage with the government, that they can make decisions for themselves, that they can influence their own lives? So we track those outcomes and we try and make sure that all of our media points towards that. Now, some of those young people also enter the next stage of the journey, which is Hustler, MBA, Shujaz Biz. But I won't talk about that because Farida will talk about that in a second. So a little illustration for you. A few years ago, we made a campaign which was all about the skills that you need to be an entrepreneur in Kenya. So we worked on 6 chapters of Shujaz, took 6 months. Each month we unpacked another key skill that young entrepreneurs need. And at the end of 6 months, we made a game. And the game looked a little bit like Monopoly, perhaps you know that game, where you play round and round and round, and along the way you learn about business. So you can see on the left-hand side there, our characters in the comic book playing the game. And then we printed the board of the game in the comic book, and you can see some real life people in. They actually write Star, who is the DJ here, and said, "Thank you, DJB. I've been reading the stories. and my business has tripled." And so we sent the DJ, as you can see, to interview her And we found that her story was a very typical story for us. So she's a young woman, she's lived on the border with Uganda, she's moved to the city, she's struggling to survive. She makes her living by selling hard-boiled eggs to construction workers. But what she's discovered by playing the game, by engaging with Shujaz, is that actually, if she sells kachumbari, if she offers kachumbari together with the eggs, that's a tomato and onion and chili salad, she triples her sales of eggs. So having heard that story, we put her in the comic book, we put her on television, we put her on the radio, we have a social media event around her, and we make a comic book again. So we're really building this idea for our audience. Look, you can be like her. She's in control. So stories like this have helped us to achieve some significant results. So in a bunch of studies, and we have a number of longitudinal panel studies, and we're just starting a randomized control trial, which Farida will talk about. A lot of research. Well, so it turns out switches on significant income for young people. So something like $20 a month more earned by people in our audience, and it's kind of related to their exposure to Shujaz. We're seeing young people less likely to get married in their teens. We're seeing young people delaying when they have their first child. And all of these are metrics that we're happy or proud of. We're starting to see young people taking control, making decisions for themselves. So partners like Ubongo and Village Radio, we work with Farm Radio, I beg your pardon. We work with lots of big partners. Some of them are big brands, some of them are big development partners. We work with lots of partners at a time because we're not a project. We've managed to sustain Shujaz over time, missing a beat, and that's one of the ways we've been able to build up to scale. So as I mentioned, a lot of our audience going online, a lot of people interested in business. And for that reason, we've developed a product which is led by my colleague Farida, who's going to talk about that now, Shujaz Biz. Farida.
All right, thank you, Rob. And one of the key things that why we run Hustler MBA, or as we call it, Shujaz Biz, it's because a lot of young people will be living, they will be graduating, but a very small percentage of those people will be able to actually find jobs in the formal sector. And basically, Hustler MBA comes in where we literally just want to, at the end of it all, can we make sure that they get some money in their pocket? And for this, it's because we want to bring people together so that anybody who experiences Shujaz Biz is the term we used for this audience-facing side. We want everybody who comes in touch with Shujaz Biz to have some money in their pockets. And we are doing this through sharing of business ideas. We are doing this through sharing of information and peer support to young people who are interested in business. And at the same time, we want to help to equip them, the audience, with money, dignity, and skills. And as you heard Rob speak about, agency is quite big for us at Shujaz Inc. And one of the things that we've come to know is that if young people do not have agency, then no amount of information, no amount of skills is really going to be able to help them. And what exactly is Shujaz Biz? So Shujaz Biz is a digital and real world learning community that brings together young Kenyans who are aged between 18 to 24 years old. And they have to be interested in business, and they come together and they share business ideas, informations, and skills. And this is because we know that not everybody will be able after graduation to work in the formal sector. Next slide, Rob. So how exactly are we doing this? We are using a combination of highly relevant role models and tricks of the trade, where it's all about, if you have to become a business person, if you have to run your own business, what sort of skills do you need? And these are very basic things, from the idea of how do you turn your idea into a business? How do you go to find your first customer? How do you market your business? How do you make connections so that you make sure that your business grows, and such and such. And at the same time, we also want to bring people together so that they get relevant knowledge in the specific area that they're working in. Here we are looking at people who are running roadside kiosks, maybe guys who are maybe running cyber cafes, people who are running food kiosks and such kind of businesses. And here it's all about, can we bring them together so that they get to learn from each other? If I'm a business person who is running maybe a secondhand clothes business, and bringing together with another person who is running a food road kiosk, when it comes to marketing, what sort of ideas, what sort of experience can they share together so that they can actually grow together? And of course, one of the things that we are using to bring them together is the idea of, we have access to over 750 short videos that speak about how to actually start, grow, and run your own business, from ideation to all those different aspects. At the beginning, when we were running Shujazbiz, we were using physical activities where we'd bring people, young people together, and they'd watch a sample of those 750 videos, and they go through a 6-week course. And here is a case study of one of the ladies who happened to go through that particular program. And she says that she sells secondhand clothes in a town in Kenya. And the challenge she came in is because that her stock was not moving as fast as she would have liked it to be. And then after attending one of the Shujazbiz sessions and watching a few videos on marketing, she got the idea on how to use social media to market her business. And from there, she gave us a story where she started taking photos of the clothes and posting them on WhatsApp stories and other social media channels. And that is something that she was not doing before. And she tells us that right now that she's actually getting more customers, and the fact that people are able to see what kind of business it is that she's running, our business is really growing, and she feels very motivated to keep hustling. This other story is of a guy who was interacting with the Shujazbiz social media channel on Facebook, actually. And on Facebook, we have the Shujazbiz Facebook channel has over 200,000 young hustlers, young people in business who are speaking together. They come together, they share questions, they share whatever challenge it is that they're having with their businesses, and they ask for peer knowledge from knowledge from their peers, and they try to look for solutions of their challenges together. So this guy came in and says he shared a story with us. So he says he had been unemployed and was looking for a business idea that required little capital to launch. And since he is a follower of Shujaz, he came across a video on the Shujazbiz Facebook page of a fruit vendor named Paul who had been featured, and his story really inspired him. Then he decided to save up a little money and decided to try the same business in his hometown. And so far, he's come back to us to tell us that he's doing quite well, and he will keep sharing on how the progress of the business with us. One of the things that we've come to realize is that as people are going through the program, the Shujazbiz program, some of them will get ideas on how to start a business. They will be inspired to get ideas on how to start a business, and other people will actually be inspired and even want to become better hustlers, and they will even learn to hustle better. And I think that is the power of having a digital community where people are able to learn from each other.
Thank you very much, Farida. I think just to end is that this idea that small incremental shifts in how people think about themselves, combined with little pieces of key information presented by role models who are accessible, who are relevant, who are authentic at scale, starts to have a sort of, we hope at least, a sort of seismic influence on the prosperity of the generation of people we care about. So that's very much our model, building agency and doing it at scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Ubongo and to Shujaz and to Farm Radio International for these, for all of the important work that you're doing. We have just a little bit of time. For those of you that can stay on, we'll ask a few questions, and please feel free to enter questions into the chat. Each of your organizations are thinking very carefully about the images and the agency of children, youth, adults, women, men, those people that you are serving and working with. Do you have an equity approach or a formal process that you follow or consider when developing your materials? And if so, could you talk a little bit about that process? And this is open to any of our partners, Farm Radio. Perhaps we can start with Doreen first from Ubongo.
Hi, sorry if there's a lag from my end. So basically how we do approach, and I think I mentioned this in my presentation, is we literally use our human-centered design approach. We actually approach the children and then we meet them where they are at, what is their understanding, and we go in it after mapping the curricula and then also being aware of where the world is right now. So it almost becomes like a battle or challenge between what their understanding is culturally versus where the world is progressing. And so when it comes to like equity, right? So sometimes equity, and especially gender equity, can be influenced by cultural norms. And we do have specific episodes that we have dedicated in actually removing the differences between, you know, what a girl is meant to do and what a boy is meant to do. So that is what we do. Like we first engage them to understand what their knowledge of this topic is and what their opinions are. And then we look at what the public school curriculum says about that, how we should teach it. And then we also use our external or extensive research of where the world is at. And then we try to strike a balance between the two. And that is what informs what we feed into our content.
Excellent, thank you so much. And Benjamin and Farm Radio International, if you could quickly say anything that you are doing systematically to think about equity in your programming. And
yes,
audience to speak about disabilities as well.
Yes, we look at equity, especially gender equity, seriously when we are designing the radio program. For example, during the formative research, we looked specifically at the time that women are available to listen to the radio program. The time that children are available to listen is taken seriously into consideration. We also ensure there is a gender consideration within the content itself, making sure that what information applies to the youth and women are delivered accordingly, so that you don't think about the farming family or the farmer as just a man, but we have a lot of women who are also farmers. We have the youth. So this is what we do to ensure that there is that gender consideration and also the issue of equity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And handing over to Shujaz, and there's also a question also in the chat, if you could also explain a little bit of what you mean by hustling in the hustling.
Thank you. So we constantly think about who our audience is and how they're relating to our work, and we're trying to measure that almost on a weekly basis. We're trying to checking in on the data that we can see from social media and then annual surveys and so on. And what we discovered is that we can, you know, one of the issues for us is young women struggling to have access to our media, and we work very, very hard to try and ensure that we are enabling that access as much as possible. It's interesting, internet access is very much boy heavy. It's not at all, it's access to devices we think is the challenge. So again, we're trying to tweak our content and the mix in our media itself so that it appeals to young women. And what we've discovered is that small changes in the style of media that we make can cause a surge of young women to come on, which is really exciting. But big problems, I think, in future, particularly as the internet is not equitably distributed. So that's a real future challenge. The word hustler, Farida, can you speak to the word hustler? It's a big word in Kenya.
Yes. So there are different connotations to the word hustler in the sense of the noun itself and the verb. So when somebody says they are a hustler, if they can call themselves hustler, then they feel very empowered. However, if someone else is using that word, if someone else calls them a hustler, then there is a little bit of connotation. It's like you're calling them lazy, you're calling them, it depends on how and context of how someone is using it. But if a particular person who is in business is using that particular word, then it becomes really easy. And actually, our program actually did go through a journey in the sense of, at the beginning, we used to call it hustle fiti, in the sense of it's about hustling, it's about the right way to manage your business and such. And then we went on the ground and we were listening to young people, and now we got to understand that this is not necessarily the right connotation to use. And now we had to translate that back and figure out which term can we use that is very friendly, that everybody feels empowered to use, that everybody is very proud of. Hence now we actually changed from the word hustler to the word, to the term shujazbas, which is more generally accepted. And yeah, there is a huge connotation as to how, and context has to be really, really important as you're using that particular word.
Fantastic, thank you all. And a little bit of kind of building off of that, we'll have two more questions. We have a question about sort of any specifics you can give on serving communities with disabilities. as well as any advice that you would give to others that are working in this space of education and social media spaces to create more accessible, equitable, and transformative content. So any advice and any work that you're doing specifically with people with disabilities. We can start.
So
again.
we've been doing a lot of work recently on disability. Actually, we've been running a campaign on that specifically for the last sort of 8 months. So, and that's been about, I think simply at one level, just norming the idea that disability does not exclude you from the economy, doesn't exclude you from life necessarily. And I think so we've done some really powerful work by building new role models around disabled characters in our world who aren't unable there, but they face many challenges. And also featuring, for example, there's a senator in Kenya who suffers from albinism. So he's been a star in the storyline, and we're just trying to make it normal in the kind of context of our campaigns and the context of our media without spotlighting disability, just to normalize disability in our lives. And also to start bringing out actually assistive technologies. So the subtext of this campaign for us is to try and enable young people to recognize that simple solutions can often make the difference between productive and unproductive people. So it's normality, normalizing disability, making it part of everyday experience, and dignity in disability, and then pointing at accessible solutions. It's been an incredibly powerful campaign, actually, with huge levels of interest and feedback from our audience.
Doreen or Benjamin, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, so I actually echo the same sentiments. And for us, specifically moving into season 5 of Ubongo Kids. So before, we did also feature a character called Amani, who does have albinism, but I guess it's still like a tricky, does albinism count as disability or not? However, in season 5, we have episodes that specifically address disability. And for us, we try to really reinforce the idea that you're not disabled, you're just differently abled. And so we have an episode where we talk about paraplegia and what that means. And the character that we use, he is in a wheelchair. It's a kid in a wheelchair, but he used to be a dancer before. And he, after having a car accident that he was involved in, he had to readapt to his dance moves. And so he ends up teaching the rest of the characters how to move for a dance competition that they end up winning. And then we also have like a deaf character that also teaches that, you know, disability comes in different forms. It's not just one and the same. And so this new character is going to be called Tabasam. She teaches the rest of the characters how to communicate, but then also reinforces the ideas that just because you are disabled does not mean that you're a liability, and she's still smart and she's still just differently abled. And so she leads them through this science presentation, which means she's a scientist. So it's really something that we're really trying to enforce into the next generation. On the other hand, though, it does come with challenges, and especially with addressing deafness, because different countries have different sign languages. And so once we are trying, as I said in presentation, our goal is to grow and become a Pan-African show. Different countries have different sign languages. So that kind of poses as a bit of a challenge, not one that cannot be overcome, but it's something that you also have to consider. So we have to look for alternative means for the characters not to sign per se. We don't animate them signing. Maybe they can use like pictographs or pictures to communicate whatever they are trying to communicate, and then we can use different sign languages. So it's like we really are trying to move in that direction, but
Benjamin, do you want to add anything more before we leave our last question?
Yeah, I saw a question on the page. I'm sure the explanation is on this is clear. I saw a question on the page on
Fortunately, I think we have frozen. So we'll let Benjamin join us. I'm going to just move sort of to the last and final question and let Benjamin join in. There's a question about language and following up on the idea of marginalized individuals and groups. What work are your organizations doing with non-dominant language speakers, and how are you making some of these decisions on language in your programming and your in your content?
So let me start. So as I mentioned, we Kenya and in Tanzania, which is Sheng in Kenya. But in principle, our view on language is that we should allow our audience to communicate in the language that they're comfortable with. And that so in our media, we're quite agnostic. What we want is understanding. We don't work in English unless there's a character who should be speaking English. So if I was in the comic book, I'd probably be speaking in English, whereas we might use Swahili, we might use mother tongue, we might use Sheng. But our guiding principle is that as many people as possible should understand it. And actually, you know, where possible, we try and reduce the language down to the bare minimum. But I think one of the challenges of doing mass media is that if you go deep into anything narrow, you lose millions of people. So you have to try and choose a kind of vanilla flavor that the maximum number of people will be able to absorb, or else you lose great swathes of the potential audience. So it's getting the balance right, because you've got to feel authentic. It's got to be sensitive to the audience, but it also has to be inclusive. And so there's a challenge between mass media and sort of, for example, small indigenous localized languages. That's a misfit for us. Maybe in the Hustler work online, the Shujaz biz, we might get there where we can actually have language specific videos, but we're not there yet.
Thank you. Doreen, Farida, or Benjamin, anything to add to that on languages?
No, I think
Yes,
that
in terms of
Yes,
languages,
it's interesting because I think with Ubongo,
Sorry, we have a lag. Let's start with Farida, then go Doreen, and then Benjamin.
Yeah, what I was going to say is basically just in support of Rob, because most of the time we're just trying to use the language that we know our young people understand. And most of the time it's because we are on the ground all the time. We're trying to listen to the conversations they are having. We get to understand what sort of languages it is that they would be most comfortable with. And at the same time, trying to make it as conversational as possible, because the language we are using for the Kenyan market is Sheng, and it varies according to the different locations. In Nairobi, one word might necessarily mean something else in Mombasa. So it's just about listen to the people on the ground, get to understand what they're talking about. And at the same time, I think it does help the fact that we work with young people, because most of the time they really do understand what's happening on the ground. So a combination of all those different aspects really does help.
yes, in terms of language, we always make sure we are using the language that the people have selected, because we sometimes will have a radio program that may cover more than one region where they have different languages. So sometimes we have two languages going at the same time. So one on a particular day and then the second one on another day, to enable people to associate with what the language that they themselves are very convenient and very familiar with. Again, on the social media platform like the IVR, we also use local language for all the recordings that we have on that platform. So you call and you select the language of your choice, and then you listen to the menu or the information that is there. Thank you.
Doreen,
yeah, and if I can add in, yes, so from Ubongo's point of view, it's actually almost, I don't want to say opposite from Shuja's approach, but basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to reach kids who don't actually speak the common, or yes, common languages. So we are adapting into the African local languages, because our goal is to reach the last mile child type of thing. And so we are adapting into not just Kiswahili, because we did start off as Kiswahili and English, but then we went to French, but now we're going into Hausa, Kinyarwanda, Kikuyu, like we're really, really trying to bring these learnings to kids who do not speak what I guess are called national languages, but whatever their local language is, because that is our target and our mission. So I think it's quite interesting that we have different approaches, but this is something that comes to light when we have these discussions, how our approaches are different, but we all have the same goal and targets at the end of the day. So it's quite interesting that this.
Thank you. We are reaching the end of our forum, and I just want to again reiterate our appreciation and our gratitude for sharing all of your knowledge and your experience and your innovation. We will send around an information about each of the organizations, also links to all the participants today, and we'll share the link to the video when it is available. But thank you again, and a virtual applause to sort of all of our participants for joining us. And we look forward to continuing to watch and follow your organizations and all the amazing work that you are doing. Thank you to the ITEP team, David, Beck, and Carmen for organizing this forum, and all the students and the faculty and other guests from our community that have joined us. Please stay tuned to our upcoming International Education Week events in November. We will share the link with you as well. And everyone be safe, be well, and do good work. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.